Welcome to the Embodiment Matters podcast with me, Erin Giesemann-Rabke, and my beloved Carl Rabke. We don't have the luxury of living in ordinary times, but rather we live in extraordinary ones where the way we live in the next decade will make a huge difference in the future of life on planet Earth. We aspire in this tapestry of rich conversations drawn from a variety of wise perspectives to share resources to help you embody the wisdom, compassion, and skillful actions that are needed during these times. You can find out more about our classes and sign up for our newsletter at embodimentmatters.com. You can also become a supporting member of our podcast with a small monthly donation. Look for Embodiment Matters at patreon.com.
Welcome, listener friends. In this conversation, I had the great delight of speaking with Jozef Frucek. And Jozef and his partner Linda are the creators of Fighting Monkey, which is a beautiful system that weaves together movement, learning, communication, creativity, improvisation, and a real reimagination of both the process and the experience of aging and just what it is to be a lifelong learner through movement. And Jozef has studied deeply in Chinese medicine and martial arts, also has advanced degrees in voice and movement, and he and Linda teach at universities and dance companies and performance companies all around the world. And I had followed Fighting Monkey for many years just in the natural movement world, and when they began to offer some classes during the pandemic, I was able to do some Zoom work with Jozef, and I just loved it. I found it really reinvigorated my own movement practice, and elements that were so similar to things that I had done in Qigong or Tai Chi practice, but had a different flavor to it. And I was reminded of a line from one of our beloved Feldenkrais teachers, the late, great Ruthy Alon, who coined this term, the grammar of spontaneity. And I find that Fighting Monkey really has that quality to it, that it gives a kind of grammar through which we can grow spontaneous, natural, creative, expressive movement. So in our conversation, we speak a lot about the importance of spontaneity and creativity in movement and how much that affects how we think and how we express our emotions and how we speak, and how important creative possibilities are in light of the intense challenges we face in the world today. We also talk about the importance of play and how important and essential that is for learning, especially through adulthood, and how many adults lose that quality of play when we approach learning later on in life. We also talk about how movement shapes our aging, and our approach to movement can really shift our experience of how we age. So there are many fun topics, and you can find out more about Jozef and Linda and Fighting Monkey's classes at fightingmonkey.net. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Welcome, Jozef. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
So one place we like to jump off of in these podcast conversations is just with a twofold question of what is embodiment to you? How would you describe embodiment? And also, why does it matter? Why is it important now in these times?
It's a very broad question, right? Well, embodiment, there are many other different aspects of life that are equally important, but let's say embodiment it's a quality for me of experience. It means that you are engaged with the world, you communicate with the world, and you try to kind of create a kind of meaningful connections that affect your system fundamentally enough to change your perception, change your action, and maybe change or affect the way you are living your own life and how you are affecting or letting others to affect your being and your interaction with social and physical environment, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm wondering if you could describe a little bit about what Fighting Monkey is and how that came to be through you and Linda.
Well, in the center of of the entire research of Fighting Monkey is really one sentence. And that one sentence is the quest for better communication, because we are looking at the history of life from somewhere 4 to 3.8 billion years ago, and we're looking at a single cell organism. And then we look at the evolution and how the organisms become more complex and more sophisticated about their behavior and their action in the world, in their environment. We see the one underlying current, underlying line, and that's not only survival. We do not only want to survive, but even more importantly, we try to communicate, and we try to communicate better. If we achieve a good communication with the environment, which means our own internal environment, but also the external environment that is really shared environment, we are kind of linking, there is no separation. If that communication is good, you will be not only surviving, you will be thriving, and you will be enjoying your life. So that would be like kind of very central aspect of what Fighting Monkey is looking at. And then maybe the second part that we could be talking about is that hopefully it is a platform, decentralized platform, on which experts from many different scientific or other fields can investigate what does that mean to communicate better, to support and sustain viability of life.
Yeah, one thing I really appreciate is just the systems thinking approach to how you teach, and how important that is now, both internally and how we move, but that we're embedded in dynamic systems, and that it does seem like communication is such an essential piece, and one that seems to break down on many levels, both internally and externally.
Yes, we've been thinking about it a lot with Linda, and we said, what is our roles? What is our role as a teachers, as a communicators, as someone who is being so many years involved in educational platforms in universities, then maybe in a free world, in a free workshops and seminars that we held around the world. And we realized the construct of our teaching has to be somehow based on biology, evolution, and that scientific kind of background. Because when we look at the life supporting functions of an organism, right, which would be maintain your boundaries, which is like understand better who you are in multicellular organism. So maintain your boundaries, move, respond, digest, metabolize the energy. So this is energy management, excrete, then reproduce and grow. So if you are looking at the practice that should and could support life, it has to have all these 8 elements together. If you're looking at the practice and you see that practice only offers movement, or it only offers responsiveness, or it only offers the narrative about who you are, let's say this maintaining boundaries, who am I, through form of meditation or through whatever form of internal practice, then it is not complete. Something will be missing, and something will be off the whack, something will be off the balance. So you have this kind of these 8 pillars that support life. And then you immediately know through biology that these 8 pillars, they need to come in appropriate measures, right, appropriate qualities and appropriate actions. And immediately we are talking about homeostasis. We're talking about some kind of zero to which we need to kind of attend and we need to support in our lives, right?
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to follow that into looking at zero forms, because this is, in my understanding, you're in this zero forms work that you teach, you're getting to the place of origin, like where forms emerge from. And I found it, having practiced many different movement forms, there was something about zero forms to me that felt like a common denominator of like, oh, this is a seed that goes into what comes out of Tai Chi or Wing Chun or what was going through Ida Rolf's work or Feldenkrais. Like, so there was something that was really moved me in my own practice of what is this state at the beginning out of which these different systems kind of emerge and intersect. So I'd love to hear you talk about your process with that.
Yeah, of course, me as a researcher, me as someone who's been working in academic field for many years, I am thriving to find a theory of everything. I am almost sure I will not be able to find it, but that doesn't stop me for searching for it, right? I feel every day that I'm failing, and there's always more information that I need to absorb and kind of filtrate and digest, and it leaves me a lot of sleepless nights. But I really enjoyed it, looking for the theory of everything. And so we came up with this, if you talk about this homeostasis, then we should also be talking about allostasis, like we achieve balance through interrelations. So we have allos from Greeks, which means someone else. So I'm achieving my internal stability through relations and through relationships that I create. Of course, the Western science would be much more talking about homeostasis because they know what the set point more or less is. And allostasis is very well understood and is very important, but no one wants to go much into that because we need to know in which context the person is operating. And there must be some kind of intervention in how people behave and which kind of relations they build in order to stabilize them or maybe improve their health. But I am very much interested in that. I am very much interested in preventive medicine. I am very much interested for you to find your own type of medicine. Of course, not alone, always in support and in relation to other practitioners and maybe doctors and available information that is around. But we need to, as the medicine, as the Western or Eastern medicine is developing, we need to make our effort also to develop with it. And so we came up with this idea, okay, there's this long line of evolution, right? There is this beautiful chain of evolvement, absolutely amazing. But then there is this combination of your mother and your father. And so you're kind of very unique constitution. You are some kind of very unique biological signature, what we call in our research. And so we say, who is that person? How that person sounds, how that person moves, what is the proportion of that person, right? And so we said, okay, we need to, if we want to create a good practice, not practice that is about Jozef and Linda and forcing people through our agenda to train how we train, but rather create an open practice that can support anyone else's ideas and anyone else's dreams, then we have to say, okay, we need to help people to support them to understand what is their zero. When they understand what is their zero, that means, for example, in voice, we need to give it some examples so the listeners can understand. So if we would be talking about voice, if you constantly abuse, misuse, or deform your voice, eventually it will lose its vibration, it will lose its variability. You will not be able to carry with your voice the communication, no variabilities, emotions, your internal and gestural expressions. It will become somehow monotone because you are forcing it always in some direction.
Right.
So we say, if we help you to understand where you sound the best as you will be capable of many variations. You will be actor of many roles. Mm-hmm. And when we remember the first book of Nikolai Bernstein, right? He was talking about, yes, everyone can. We always talk about endurance, power, and strength, but we need to be talking about dexterity. We need to talk about creativity in a movement, creativity in how we live our lives. So then we say, okay, how can I be an actor that can play many roles? Mm-hmm. Because the behavioral flexibility will allow me to respond to various situations with flexibility, right? With compassion, with variability of my voice, my movement, my actions, right? And so we say, okay, I would like to be actor of many roles because that gives me so many more possibilities in my life, my professional life, my business, my personal life, right? My relation to my kids, my wife, my close and further friends and students. So we say, okay, we have these zero forms. So these zero forms are basically based on a kind of 5 fundamental principles, and they are stillness practices. And stillness practices would be usually associated with meditation, let's say, or introspection, right? Stillness, and everything grows out of stillness. But I understood that we are rather confused when we talk about meditation. And so I understood at some point in my research and in the way we started to articulate the stillness practices, we were saying that meditation came out of hunting movements. And that means that I am in nature. Let's say we jumped 100,000 years backwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or 500,000. We were more animals than we are right now, right?
Yeah.
And we are in nature, and we are capable, and we need to observe the nature in order to survive, to hunt, to collect berries, and observe the environment, the impermanence of nature, the cyclicality of certain events, or regularity or certain patterns. So we became very, very good observers. That's why we managed so well in evolution, right? And relatively well. And that led us to become sensitive. That led us to reflect on nature and us being some kind of mirror of that nature. So stillness practices is about go into nature and explore the mapping, explore the observation, explore how you find your own medicine, explore these all contextualized variabilities rather than sitting in a room looking at a white wall, because your mind can mold you and confuse you in many different ways, right? So go and find your own mountain and your own language. So that would be first element.
I love how that puts meditation in, that it's about relationship, that it's about intimacy with life and a moment rather than some walled off container.
We always think that we have some kind of energy centers, but in fact, we just borrow that collection of atoms and they will disappear eventually. So we are more like a transmitters that are holding together for a little while. And when the entropy will hit more and more, there will be more and more disorderness, and eventually we will disappear, right? We will pass away. And so, of course, I'm looking for that more available practice. I would like to demystify, because when I went with my father for hunting, and I've seen a wild animal, and you need to wait for a wild animal for hours sometimes, and many times really unsuccessfully. But in these long times of waiting, you somehow disappear. And when you see suddenly an animal, something very magical happens in me. And the magical thing in me is I become more connected to that animal, because I feel that I am more like the animal. It's like my old memories from 50,000 years ago. So I become more quiet, I become more soft. I feel that very special bound to that animal. It's not something that I'm gonna eat. It's not something that just lives next to me, but I feel really strong connections that I am animal as well. So there is that kind of led us with Linda to understand that, yes, it's more hunting practice, or not hunting. It's more like being in nature practice, and not, or of course, not romantic, making a romantic image about nature, because as I know, we are coming from hunting family. You are freezing in a night in a nature. It's brutal experience, and there is so much of unsuccess. There is so much of it's tough. It's not like, oh, I'm going to nature and I'm enjoying because I have an amazing sleeping bag. And it's really demanding. When you're sitting somewhere or standing to wait for an animal, you need to have certain physical capacities and mental capacities to do that.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to a couple of points after you get to your other four principles of zero forms, but I want to come back to the more about the animal body. But what was the second form you were going to speak of, or the second principle?
Oh, well, the second one is after is joints articulation, right? This would be like, okay, stillness, but maybe you wanted to talk about the stillness and then we move on into other ones. So I don't go too far ahead.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Well, what moved when you were talking about that, looking back 50,000 years or however you want to go back, is just what a drastic shift has happened, whether you say from agriculture, industrial revolution, or last 20 years, how much sensitivity and intelligence around just what we're speaking of, voice, rhythm, movement, ritual, intimacy with nature, that has been removed from many people's modern day lifestyle. And yet it's so close. It's like, it's right there in how we're wired and how how do you orient teaching towards something that is in there, in our bones, in our wiring, but not in there for most people's behaviors or how they attend through the day, or how much we're, pulled into phones or laptops. So anything you want to
It's a
reflect on that?
challenging thing. When I was younger, I used forms to teach people because that at my level of my understanding at that time was necessary. Because I have a long history of learning Chinese medicine and learning internal martial arts, and then learning some external martial arts like boxing, freestyle wrestling, and basketball was also part of my career, right? And I constantly visit those different forms. I was teaching through forms, but then we said with Linda how we can not remove the forms, how we can remove ourselves away from the teaching so that students can come up with those ideas, discovering them by themselves, creating situations within which a certain situation can be discovered, certain understanding can be awakened rather than given. And that led us to speculate that we can formulate our knowledge in such a way when we are sharing it that we rather address what was before the name in the form, and every person can come up with their own understanding what the form should look like, what should be their traditional form, so to say, right?
Yes.
Or their own ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Because I cannot anymore, I cannot align myself anymore, even, that's maybe, and that's related to the second point, joints, control, joints articulation. I cannot imagine that there is this one master that telling you how the arms should be, or that this movement is for the liver and that movement is for the stomach and that movement is for your lungs. If you do not actually understand and have that experience through understanding how the rivers flow or how the energy and information belongs to topology within which that energy and information is linked to, right? And how these systems, they interlinked. So we said, okay, we know that every good system needs to have a stillness practice, needs to have some kind of joints articulation, and that can be more yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, Alexander technique, Feldenkrais, or whatever. So in our research, we say, okay, whatever that practice it is, you need to articulate in some way the joints to understand the topology of your body, the architecture, the Bauplan, the evolutionary Bauplan, the corridors within which the energy can travel. And we can be doing it more on the floor, more through stretching, more through static poses, or we can be moving with the gravity, dancing with the gravity, and understanding our system as complex system. And so we always show to people what are the possibilities: lay on the ground, stretch, make poses, stretch, or why do we stretch if animals don't?
Right.
Animals don't. Animals do not stretch, so why do we? And this is a very radical question that starts to kind of provoke a certain thinking. So when do I supposed to stretch? How much? So in the second part of the zero forms, we say articulate the joints, but respect yourself as a complex system. And the complex system has to be understood in its totality, in the networks and relations they create. You cannot understand the body through isolation.
Right.
You're probably going to understand it the best if you work with the gravity on your feet, because you can test and you can assess more clearly what is the actual age of your joints, right? But we would not force any more people do this form or do that form. This is my problem. And those people that are with us for 10 years, they trust us enough, or they've seen that in our aging bodies, we have really good results, or that people around them have a very good results, that people expand their range through organizing the rhythm and coordination rather than stretching or isolating the joints or whatever, which is really, there's no any base for it in nature, in biology, neither in physics, right? Neither in astrophysics, nowhere. Nothing is isolated from anything.
Right. Yeah. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier, that the joint relation is in relation to the outer world in terms of function, like lifting, throwing, punching, jumping, that it's not a concept, but it's how do we organize to move powerfully or to jump or to drop something.
Exactly. And adding to that, what you said, it is also your capacity to sense yourself. Because if we talk about the homeostasis, right? Homeostasis is kind of core consciousness, what Antonio Damasio would be talking about, a great researcher. He would say your homeostasis is capacity to map your entire body in any place. So this is a kind of first core consciousness that we are not conscious about, right? There is this beautiful, through evolution, we got that gift that there is some mechanisms inside of us that we cannot go into a detail of that, but that takes care of the fact that the mistakes will not happen and viability, the urge to live will be there, right? So body will be balancing it by itself. But then up above that, we need to create some kind of other consciousness that contributes to the homeostasis or allostasis. So it means this joints articulation is to create those connections that are there, but we become more aware of them, right? Mm-hmm. So not only for jumping, throwing, and running and fighting, but also for sensing, feeling how I am today. Because we also removed so much the sensation from ourselves. Sometimes we train to desensitize our body. Oh, look how strong I am, or look how flexible I am. No, try to sense yourself. Try to sense if your joint, the range of motion in your joint is equally developing with the amount of energy that you have. That should be following that openness of the range. Mm-hmm. There's an interesting thing, Carl, like sometimes people ask us, well, someone comes into your room and he's sick, he cannot move and all the joints are closed. You have to help them to stretch to open. And I say, no, don't expand their landscape of activities because they don't have enough energy. First, what you need to organize is to harmonize what is available to them at this point, at this day. Right. And when we harmonize it, when it becomes musically more organized, then there will be a wish in the body because there will be energy surplus to discover a bigger range. Right. So don't rush in healing people. When they have a small range of motion, when they are not well coordinated, make that what they have a little bit better organized.
Right. And it also seems to help facilitate them grow their sensitivity. Because before range or before increase of energy, like, can they have the capacity to sense what's happening?
Exactly. In this line.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And so if we say we have the stillness maps, we have this joints articulation that can be in various forms, and then we say and decide what you want to work on. And then we say, okay, the next part of zero forms is coordinations, which means how the energy flows through those corridors, through this Bauplan, evolutionary Bauplan, our architecture. And then comes improvisation, which is how can we create an unexpected network, how we can become aware of various movements, variabilities that no one ever seen before. What is that special color, my special poetry in my movement? You may be a boxer, right? But you have your very unique style. This is your very colorful expression, your improvisation within which you can act in the world. And then the last element of the zero forms is working with the voice. And people ask us, why not breathing? And I say, well, breathing is great, but breathing is just a transporter. And if you pay too much attention to breathing, it can also be blocked. Let the breathing be. Because when we've done the research in university with my tutor of communication, Ludmila Machachova, and we've worked together for over 10 years, what we worked on with her and different psychologists, we said, we rather focus on, or we have a look on the voice. Because voice can with much higher clarity tell what is the attunement of your whole body? Where are your thoughts? How distracted you are? How attuned your whole organism is? Nothing can be hidden in voice. Nothing can be, and we don't have to think about singing. We can be, or chanting mantras. We can be talking about talking, right? Or humming in some way or another. There we have a much clearer feedback about what is happening in that organism and how to attune that organism to vibrate and vitalize itself.
Yeah.
I'm talking too much, maybe.
Oh, no, it's perfect. So I want to come back to this theme of spontaneity because I feel like it's so important on many levels, and also important with the great challenges we face around the world, that we need things that have never been thought before or have never been that the solutions aren't going to come from conventional reality right in front of us. Yes. And in my when I did one of your first Zero Forms classes, I think I wrote this to you, that the best part was when the class ended and then it just spontaneously continued. And there were movements that hadn't happened. And just the way that planted the seed of spontaneous ways of moving that then lead to spontaneous ways of being, thinking. So I'd love if you just would talk a little bit about on the value of spontaneity and what conditions support that.
So if we talk about spontaneity, I would like to talk about play and creativity.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
And hopefully when we are children, we have more time to play, and eventually when the life starts to press on us as we are growing older and we gain more responsibilities and etc., we feel that the play are just like a small islands in an ocean of really unpredictable and complex world. And when I was looking backwards in my life or life of Linda, I always saw this kind of quality that we had, and we always ask those questions: why the life should become more serious, why everything is not kind of approached through a play, and how we could, because the way we organized our life, I don't know, I don't want to make some false statement, but I am getting paid in universities and in my lectures and in a workshop for playing. And I realized everyone wants to play. And everyone realized through play, structures they arise, there is an emergence, there is a more complexity, there is in social interactions, there is a great intervention to many traumatic situations we have in past. In playfulness, we can rewrite the script of our past. We can project different scenarios into a future. And so we said with Linda, we're gonna be teaching mainly through play. Right. And no matter what anyone tells me, you need this or that exercise, I'm gonna get someone being an Olympic champion through more playing than putting them in a rigid program, because I understand that playfulness and creativity and dexterity is the most important and most vital element for our capacity to respond to new challenges. We kind of forget that life is unpredictable. We forget that beautiful flow of our life will be punctuated or ruptured by some unexpected events. And in those moments, we realize, if I'm not playful, if I didn't have experience of creative act in a time of peace when I was okay, it's going to be very difficult to overcome the trouble with novel solutions.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And we had just a workshop right now, where I am right now, it's Salzburg, and we work with a lot of very beautiful, talented young people. And we were saying to them today that I am teaching all over the world, and I realized how many people didn't have an opportunity to be part of creative process, to be part of creating something out of nothing.
Right.
To start up with an idea and come up with an object. Start up with an idea and finishing with the book. Start up with an idea and finalizing a beautiful art project, or beautiful sculpture, or unsuccessful sculpture, or unsuccessful book. But being part of that creative process, understand how much of uselessness is necessary to become creative, and becoming familiar with frustration of not finding solutions immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate what you say about just the value of cultivating play and spontaneity when things are somewhat easy, so that it'll more likely be there when something is challenging, whether that's stepping off a curb and being surprised by a challenge that way, or having a pandemic come and being surprised by a challenge that way. That if there's not a playfulness that's practiced, it won't arise spontaneously.
Yeah, we always think like the solution would come out of some kind of thinking. No, solution and creative act is done by doing, by trying, by trials. Of course, you have deliberative processes. We are amazing animals, being capable of making a lot of scenarios in our heads before we try things. But nevertheless, if we look for novel solutions, we need to try many things, and we see, even if we thought in our head, this is the best solution, we put it in a time space, and it just doesn't work at all. And many people are being very frustrated, and it takes a lot of energy from them, understanding that they are not making progress. But when there is something truly creative, it doesn't go sometimes for years. It just doesn't go nowhere. You don't know what you're doing. And eventually out of the darkness, and there's this spark, this awakening moment where you say, oh my God, I got it. This is this idea that I was waiting for so much. But this comes out of this lot of pressures that you created in that playful, creative act that was at some points really almost unbearable.
Yeah. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about aging. You mentioned that earlier of you and Linda aging, and just ways that aging is maybe misunderstood, or what a listener might get about a different view of aging.
Okay. Well, when we do our lectures, like more formal lectures in mentorship or whatever, so we really go through scientific hallmarks of aging. So we explain the actual mechanisms that have been observed. But this is this kind of objective reality that we need to be having a look at and see if we could, in some ways, practitioners contribute to that scientific findings. But what I like to look at is this. How do we define health, or how do we define age? How do we feel in our lives when old is old, right? So I understood at some point, and I don't think it's my idea, I must have heard it somewhere. I heard everything from other people, right? So, but anyway, we are through other people. But I'm sure someone said it, that health is not absence of illness, but it is a capacity of the network that surrounds me to overcome that trouble. I cannot imagine that I will be healthy forever. I remember like doing wrestling and not being able to walk for another 2 weeks because I just did something wrong and I cannot bend anymore forward. And I literally cannot put my shoes on. It's like horrible. I cannot get into the car. But then you have these other people that laugh on you, but help you to overcome the trouble, right? Or there's a great coach and he tells you, look, I told you a million times, don't put your head down, rise with your head up. So, so I think the health is that you have these beautiful people around you that offer you an amazing feedback to correct your troubles and plan better for future. And these are, in fact, the 3 fundamental elements that the practice should offer to you. And first one is get a feedback that can indicate you that if you do what you're doing, you might get into a trouble or that you are in a trouble. And then the second building element is, can you or do you have the tools to correct that kind of behavior? Do you have capacity to correct it? And a third one is capacity of the practice to help you to construct better planning for future. And so this I would consider being healthy, right? And then, of course, I might get cancer tomorrow. Maybe I have one right now, right? But I don't feel as much worried because I've done the best I could and I have my beautiful, rich and joyful life. And if this happens, that just happens and I will have to cope with it, right? So, but I am very confident that the network that I have created will somehow keep on rolling and inspire me to go through. So sometimes in mentorship, we say, okay, you are 35 years old or 40 years old. Would you perform for me? How do you vote when you're 90 years old? Record it and send it to me. I would like to see how you perform yourself being 90 years old. They send it to you, we're looking at it, we laugh on it, and then we say, now send it to me how you would like to look when you're 90 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And they rise up more structured, they're maybe slow, but they are very elegant, the way they talk, the way they move, everything a little bit more gentle. And I say, wow, look at yourself. So, and then there's a very plausible theory on this is like an overly generalizing, right? And hopefully the listeners will excuse me for making this brutally oversimplified, but why do we age? And it seems like why we are not selecting to live longer. Of course, there are some mathematical equations why not and why this is not possible, but let's just explore one element that I'm interested in. It seems like that when your body, your behavior gives signal to your genes that you are somehow not rhythmically organized, that you are a little bit nervous, that you are curved, some genes express themselves and start to evoke more entropy and aging process. So I said, wait a minute, could I cheat my genes by faking it, laughing every day and walking straight and playing and enjoying my life with kids and with my wife and cooking and going around. And these genes are waiting there like, when this guy will age, when can we express ourselves? So because sometimes, the solution is very elegant. People come to you and they say, oh, I have a problem in the lower back because I'm always bending forward. And I say, and so which training I should be doing? I say, nothing. Just go to the city and fake that you walk straight like an actor. And they say, oh my God, it's true. I don't need like a 5 years, a special introduction to some special stretching or range of motion. Just pretend that you can dance and pretend that you can walk upright through the city like a king of the world. Mm-hmm. And you immediately feel better. And this is what I mean by demystifying, and not putting people on a D road and they pay a lot of money and they stay with you for many years. No, give them solutions today. Allow them to make the best of their life today, not in 15 years. They can really have tools available to become better immediately.
Yeah. It reminds me of, there's a line from a Tibetan teacher, Thinley Norbu Rinpoche, that says, serious mind is always exhausted and play mind always has energy. That there's a sense that playfulness, which occurs so spontaneously in animals and in children, it's life force. There's always energy for it, and the serious mind does have that sense of entropy and exhaustion. And so
very, very much. I remember one student many years ago. She described me in some kind of writing. She had to do a report somewhere, and she wrote, and she said like, oh, Jozef is, if I could describe it, Jozef is like a 6 years old child in front of the Christmas tree. And I felt like, oh my God, this is really bad description. And then I realized, no, this is actually the most amazing description. I'm always like a little child. I'm always excited about what's happening around. So that little bit stayed with me until this later age of my life. There is always this little bit of childishness in me.
I'm wondering, while we're on the subject of aging, a lot of times if you look at, I don't know, Ido Portal or many natural movement circles, that they tend to be younger, athletic bodies that you see in the videos. And if someone's, say, like in their 70s and maybe has a job where they've been sitting, or has lots of injuries or something, like what are entry places? Like how, if you sort of aren't young and nimble and healthy, like what are ways in that you might offer?
When you are young, what was the question?
Like for someone maybe who has not had an embodied practice, or is maybe a little heavy or older or back pain, because what I was saying is in many of the videos around natural movement or fighting monkey intensives, they tend to be on the younger side and on the more athletic side.
Yes, I get it. Well, we work with almost all age groups. What people get on the video, that's always a question, how you demonstrate what you're actually doing, right? We have people from all ages, and regardless of what you really do, if there is no demand on where you should be, like if I do not create some kind of static, rigid program that you need to do that many pull-ups or that many lifts or that much of weight, that this is what means fitness. But if the training is open enough to support where you are actually, and if there is this capacity of this training that you're doing to make a lower or higher level, having a black belt or white belt working together almost seamlessly, then you solve the problem of who can attend the workshop. Mm-hmm. Right? Anyone can start at any point because it is available. Right. The life is always available to you, right? It is a question, of course, like coming to a live workshop for many seems to be a obstacle because we are fearing meeting maybe other people, etc. But there has to be a constructive environment within which people can feel safe to try new things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think too what you said, if it's not emphasizing a form to achieve, but but really emphasizing principles that you could do in any physical state or at any age, principles that you can embody. Because I also get that there's a way that, as I mentioned earlier, that there's an essential flavor of principle that you bring that is kind of what these different forms or traditions kind of grew out of, that way of inner listening and being in dynamic relationship with surroundings.
I kind of do not like at my age to impose anything on people. I don't have a very special agenda or do what I do. I rather say, okay, we need to in some way play in our life, right? It is really, we can agree on that. Can we agree that we are complex systems? Can we agree that we need to play? Can we agree that we need to move joints in some way? Can we agree that we need to reflect on ourselves? Okay, the way you're gonna do it and with which form, if it is fighting monkey, the way we currently are articulating and building up a really huge body of research, or if you're gonna do it with someone else, I am totally fine with it. I really am. I just the need or wish to have people surrounding me and looking for the information only from me has no value in our value system. That's why when we said with Linda, okay, if we are setting up the practice that supports life, and we talk about these 8 pillars that supports life, and we talk about the homeostasis, allostasis, the waste of information that we need to gather is so huge that it is impossible for me or Linda to concur. Mm-hmm. That means that from the very first point of this research, we know that we need to work on it collectively. And we know that it cannot be centralized. So there is no one centralized point, maybe me or Linda or me and Linda, centralized point that would dictate how the whole system works. Mm-hmm. It is really well distributed between many different nodes and how they can locally influence their environment as well. So the corruption within fighting monkey system is very, very difficult because I do not even hold all of the information. I am being fed by other experts that are collaborating with us on certain aspects, and they constantly influence the whole central body of the research. And if you, what we'd like to say that hopefully that what we do in a core of FM is non-coding, like a DNA. It's coding for nothing and everything. It is only within the context that these things, they start to code for something. When someone applies this knowledge into physiotherapy, when someone applies this knowledge into athletics, when someone applies this knowledge to coaching or to dance or to performing arts, it doesn't matter to me, right? So within those applications, that's where the specificity will arise and will truly test if what we are articulating, this theory of everything, if it works or not. And if it doesn't, they bounce back the information on us and we are readjusting the theory. We are readjusting the body of knowledge.
Yeah, that's it reminds me of, in Buddhism, Thich Nhat Hanh has talked about the prophesied Buddha Maitreya, that the next Buddha will be the Sangha. It won't be a being who sits and disseminates the teachings, but it's the interaction that you're talking about of how it's held in community and in relationship. It actually becomes the next teacher.
Yes, and it also liberates you. It gives you so much light in your life. And I tell you why. If you look at a good scientific theory, if you come and you realize that something in my theory doesn't work, and you bounce it back on the theory, right? The theory will improve, will change, right? You proved me wrong. You proved that something is incorrect in those equations. This is not a failure. This is an opportunity for improvement. That's incredible freedom, because sometimes we feel that, we've been doing something, and usually that happens when we are preaching and we say, do paleo diet, do fasting, don't eat this, eat that, train this, don't train it. When you become fundamental about something, you might realize in 10 years, oh my God, that created a monotony. That actually created so much of misbalance in my body. But how am I going to share it with my people if I was preaching it for the last 10, 15 years? So if you do not preach and if you try to articulate this non-coding environment, then if there is something wrong in the theory of everything, you bounce it back, the theory has changed. Or maybe someone will come with a question and you realize, oh my God, I didn't know that with what I have in my hand, I can actually solve also those questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of fundamentalism and going back to what you started with around communication, like I noticed for sure here in the United States, but also it seems in many other places in the world, this growing communication gap and people, these divides and people being fed through social media, just echo chamber of their own views, and the capacity to communicate or the capacity to empathize with someone perceived on another side seems to be rapidly deepening. And I'm wondering if you could talk just how might this work or apply to that, or what are your reflections on?
Because we were talking about this creativity and we were talking about the play. What if one of the plays is adversarial dialogue? Means that you invite people that truly disagree with what you are saying. This is one of the play. Let's say this is a theater play. We can pretend this is a theater play about me sharing my knowledge and my experience. And these people know that experience and the knowledge, and they oppose it from a different point of view. And we're going to discuss and see if we can improve it in some way. Okay, wonderful. Or what do we say? Or you sit in home and you say, and you go really against yourself and say, oh, Joseph, you talk about communication. Is it really true? You ask yourself fundamental questions and that you need to answer, or you provoke your students or your collaborators to challenge it in the right way. Really ask radical questions there. Is this really true? Do you have an evidence for what you are saying? Or how that evidence could be experienced, etc., etc. So we can create many opportunities for ourselves to be in check. But of course, this is painful and this requires energy surplus. You don't want anyone to pick up the bottom of your brick away and then everything just falls down. If I say to you, don't ever isolate, there is no animal that isolates. And if you were preaching about isolation, then you say, oh my God, well, no. Or you say, okay, what does he really mean? And I do not mean it so radical. Like when I say animals do not stretch, why do we? I know that there is a certain need for even a static stretching, right? Even though I feel like if you destroy yourself with movement, just move better. Learn how to move better, learn how to create better relation. Don't maintain your body, just work better with your body, right? You are the body, you don't have the body, it's not a machine or anything. So I believe if we have this good feedback system in place, then we can successfully operate in a more open society and be more empathic even to opposing views. Mm-hmm. Although I don't know if I would be opposing stupidity. I mean, allowing stupidity. I think maybe there I would maybe stand my ground in some way or another, but not in an aggressive way.
Yeah. It seems to go back to what we were talking about too earlier, of just the limited range, that when we have a limited range of vocal expression or a limited range of movement, we will have a limited range of
cognitive capacities,
emotional availability. Yes,
but that's why we work within the networks. That has put old science, like Newton physics are gone, just because of starting to look at the things are like non-linear at all, right? So we need to be looking at network and relations. These are absolutely non-linear things. There can be 1 + 1 = 3, because, there are synergies. There's something, like it's not a sum of one individual, second individual. It's not like one joint, second joints. The whole body can create some kind of really incredible synergetic, activities and creative potentials, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I also appreciate just coming back on so many angles to like that we are animals, that we have an animal body, and that we've done lots of differentiation and isolation, but in there is this intelligence that humans have had for much longer than we've had isolation and disconnection.
Yes. And maybe, in that case, then we should be talking, how often do we actually move, or do we more exercise?
Yes.
When we when people call themselves movers, then I say, oh, this is amazing. Can you please cross the space? And then you see, well, they're not moving. They're doing a set of combos that they learned. Learned choreographies of exercises that would maybe pretend to be like a mover, or this is this trick or that trick, or this is this form that was taught from that master, but move through the space, express yourself in this twisted four-dimensional entity, where the time space kind of melts and twists and time has almost no relevance, right? So moving instead of exercising. And yes, of course, that's painful, because when we are training moving, you get so much exposed, because you understand that you constantly move in the same way, maybe that you have certain habitual patterns that is very difficult to break. Even if they're good, we still look for expansion, the colors and pastels that we can be using for painting, right? Mm-hmm. For emotional expression. Maybe we want, but some artists, they use only black and white color for all their life, but maybe this is not as good and viable for our organs and our joints to always move in the same way.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think, in Feldenkrais work, one of the realizations people have often when they attend to how they're moving is just the level of self-aggression or disconnection, that when we really listen to how we're moving ourselves, many of us have not been taught to move ourselves so kindly. It's taken aggressively through forms or asana practice or something, but that level of tenderness or care or spontaneity or power.
I also believe that from what I've seen, because I've seen so many people in my life, if you do whatever these classical practices, this may be boxing, jiu-jitsu, tai chi, yoga, meditational practices, philosophical practices, you can always arrive to a full understanding. It really depends on the person and the teacher. We always only have to come back to these 8 pillars. Do this practice actually support my life? And if it does, it doesn't matter what it is. Mm-hmm. Because maybe in your context, that thing works the best.
Well, I know we're getting toward the end of our time. I'd love to hear just a sense of a vision. Like, what aspiration do you have through your work, but for the world? Like, what kind of a world would you imagine coming 20 years down the road, 40 years down the road, 100 years?
I truly do not know. It's like I am teaching people to project in the future, but I believe in humanity. I believe we are extremely creative people. I know we've done a lot of damage, but I think that kind of good in us will prevail, and we try to solve very complicated situations, energy resources. We are too many on this planet, etc. We try our best to kind of manage it all in some kind of way. I believe in humanity. So I believe this place will be better and better in some way or another. I have kind of positive view, although I think we will extinct very soon. Which I also don't think it's really big deal, Mm-hmm. We feel so important for ourselves, but we look at the dinosaurs that been here for 120 million years and they were gone, and we are much shorter here, and we have managed to create a lot of pain and a lot of abusion around us. So if we pass away, it's just going to be okay. There will be another form of life that will be maybe more intelligent, mm-hmm. more creative,
and hopefully we'll have playfulness and spontaneity in the process. Well, Jozef, thank you so much for your time. It's been a delight to be here and talk with you today.
It was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, it's great if you want to share it with friends or post about it on social media. Also, you could make a donation to support the podcast or find out more information about our classes and offerings at our website, embodimentmatters.com.